Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn, and in this video, I'll be using the Spellbinders Make a Scene card base to create a scene or a sort of a pop-up diorama card. This collection is really awesome because it does come with separately sold add-ons like this one here for, this one happens to be for birthdays, but they do have different add-ons for different occasions, and each add-on will help you create a 3-layer scene that you can then add to the card base itself. I'm actually not going to be using an add-on because today I'll be creating Christmas or holiday scene card, but I'll show you that you can really use any border dies that you have where it has a outside cutting edge, but then it does leave a portion attached to your card. You can use any decorative scene elements that you happen to have in your stash, and I'll show you how you can create your landscape or your scene bridge pieces and create your own locking mechanism to kind of fit those into the slots that are cut from your card base. And we'll go into more details about that when we get to that point. So to start off, there is a die, it'll be the largest die in the set, that will create or cut your card base, and that happens to be a 5x7 card, and this entire diorama card will fold down flat to a 5x7. And on the die itself, what's nice about it is there is that little deboss line that is on each of the 4 sides, and what's nice about that is that line actually marks the center point, which I know is probably hard to see on the cardstock itself, but when you see it in person, it'll be very, very clear. So this die right here is a thumb notch die. It'll cut out a little half circle, and all you have to do is line up your deboss line with the center of the point of the triangle on the thumb notch die, and that ensures that it's perfectly centered. And so you'll also need to cut out a center aperture, and the way that I make sure that's perfectly centered is I just use my ruler, I connect the center lines, and I just draw a little pencil line just so that I can see where that is. And then when I go to place my die, I just want to make sure my center lines, pencil markings, line up with, again, the top point of those little triangles, so that pencil line will go right through there, and that ensures that our aperture is perfectly centered left to right, top to bottom. So I'll just go ahead and erase those pencil lines now and show you what the finished panel looks like. So we'll need one that is just plain, and then one that has our additional cuts. And so that's one of the advantages of using the card-based die instead of just hand cutting a 5x7 panel, because those center deboss lines do make it really quick. The next set of die cuts we'll need are the sliding mechanism itself. So there's a die here that has some notches and a lot of individual dies that you will need to place within there. And I have everything just taped with blue tape so that it stays together nice and firm. The dies won't jump as they go through the die cutting machine and potentially overlap and damage each other. On the 2 ends here, you have these dies, which are kind of they have a stitched design, and they actually do cut. So I definitely recommend that for this piece you use some heavier weight cardstock, because you don't want to these will cut through, so you don't want paper that's going to be so thin that it really weakens your cardstock. And in fact, the next time I use this die set, I might try to see if I can just bypass these 2 and then score my own 2 lines instead, because you do end up seeing that sort of perforated edge because it does cut through your cardstock. I happen to be using 100-pound cardstock for these sliding mechanisms, and I forgot to mention my card base, I use 120-pound. Anytime I make interactive cards, I definitely like to use heavyweight cardstock to make sure that everything feels very sturdy. Now for this mechanism piece, you do need two pieces, but they need to be mirror images of each other. So you can't leave all of the slot dies in the same configuration and just cut twice. You actually have to modify the order or orientation of them in order to get a mirror image. One thing you want to keep in mind is that the longer or taller slot, that needs to go towards the end that has doesn't have those extra tabs on either side. To get your mirror image, once you have these set in place, all you need to do is just rotate it 180 degrees like I'm doing here, and that's it. And then you can die cut a second piece, and that gets you a perfect mirror image. So I like to just keep this whole configuration taped up like this, and that way I don't have to worry about lining those up every time I go to use this set. This piece here is sort of a band that will keep your sliding mechanism in place, and you'll want to die cut two of those. Those have score lines on both ends, and those are proper score lines. They don't cut through your card. This is just a little nice extra. It's a little banner die that even has a matte layer on the banner. I think the collection does come with a set of sentiment stamps that you can purchase separately that are already curved to match this banner. But if you wanted, you could even take a straight sentiment and then curve it yourself. And then when you put it onto your acrylic block, you can kind of try to mimic that curve. I won't be using that on this card, but the set also comes with this die that will die cut the word pull. And so if you do plan to use it, which I don't, but you would cut it into these two pieces here, and that way whoever gets your card, they'll know that there's something for them to do, that it's an interactive card. So now that we have these two pieces, I'm going to be using this die set from Paper Discovery. It's really cute. It's got all of these small little buildings, and then it's got that border die that has the nice soft hilly edge with a couple trees on it. And it's one die plate, but it will cut out 9 individual houses or little building structures. So I thought it would be really perfect for Christmas scene cards or holiday scene cards, which I've seen a lot of. I've just never made my own, and so I thought this Make a Scene card base would be perfect for that. The aperture where our scene takes place is measures 2.5 inches tall by 4 inches wide, and that's important because we do need to cut our own what I refer to as landscape bridge pieces. So the piece that's going to slot in between these slots that we've got on our mechanism. So this piece here, it measures 4.5 inches wide, and the height is gonna vary depending on which of the 3 slots this is meant to go through. And so you'll just want to measure each of your slots, and then just cut this down to whatever you want, really, so long as it can pass through that slot. Now, what I've already done is cut these 1/4 inch strips that I've glued on both ends. Those are the pieces that are going to lock this landscape bridge piece in place so that it just doesn't fall out of the slot. You want to make sure that those 1/4 inch pieces are longer than the slot itself. And as you can see, it's similar to what you would get in an add-on set. So here we're just hand cutting our own end pieces. And I first experimented on that first piece with attaching the side pieces flush with the bottom. That has the one advantage of you can totally assemble everything, make your scene, and then slot it in after everything's all assembled, because it's easier to kind of angle that in. However, I do recommend that you place your end pieces, those 1/4-inch strips, so that they actually hang off the bottom edge as well, because I think that will lock the piece in place better. Now, one of the things that you want to keep in mind is when your landscape pieces slot in, they do need to fold down flat. And so if you have any scene elements that are going to be above the slot, taller than the slot, there's going to be sort of a maximum width excuse me, that you can place those items, because the rest of that landscape bridge piece needs to pass through the slot itself in order for the card to fold down flat. So how much space do you have will depend on which layer you're working on, because when the card folds down flat, each of those layers has a different spacing between them. So you really only have the distance between the slots that are of the same height. And so that's one thing to keep in mind if your scene elements are built into your border die. But if there is anything that is obstructing or preventing your card from closing down completely, you can always snip those elements off of your borders and then glue them on separately where it doesn't kind of obstruct the mechanism. Okay, so now to place these two pieces. I'm working on the back of the front of our card panel, and I'm just going to use some temporary low-tack tape, painter's tape in my case, to adhere or just temporarily hold these mechanism pieces down to the front of our card base. And I have a couple of tips here. So one, instead of using your temporary tape on the back, as I've done here, what you can do is tape those pieces in place from the front through the thumb notch, because then your tape will be on the outside of the card, which will make it easier to pull off later. And you'll see what I mean in a second. Second tip is, if you hang out to the end of this video, I'll actually show you a different way of placing these bands. These bands serve two purposes. One, they hold your sliding mechanism to the front of the card, but they also serve as stoppers so that you can't pull that sliding mechanism too far. And one of the things I found was that the sliding mechanism, for me, I really had to slide it at a very careful, specific angle in order to get it to slide smoothly. But I don't want that experience for my card recipients. I want them to not feel like they are frustrated and can't get this to slide cleanly. So hang around to the end if you want to see how I fix that. So here I'm working on the back card base panel. And as you saw, I'm using a Sizzix die set to get this starry background. A lot of this will get covered, but some of it will be visible. So just keep that in mind if you are decorating your back panel. We'll have to cover up a portion of that because the sliding mechanism tabs here where I'm attaching dry adhesive tape, that will get glued right onto that back panel. And so you'll see those white tabs, which I'll later cover up, and you'll see how I do that in a moment. I like to use a combination of dry adhesive tape and liquid adhesive because the dry adhesive I can really get all the way to the edge, and then that frees me up to be a little bit more loose with my liquid adhesive, and I don't have to worry about getting that so close to the edge that it has the potential to kind of ooze out and go places that I don't want, especially in the case of creating pop-up or interactive cards where there are moving elements. I definitely want to make sure that my liquid adhesive doesn't go where I don't want it to. So here you can see how it's it's not hard, but it's just a little bit challenging to lift the temporary tape because everything is glued down flat. And you do want to make sure that you wait, if you're using liquid adhesive, to have that grab so that your mechanism doesn't go anywhere and it's well stuck to the back. But here's the card base essentially complete. So we have our aperture, and you can see here how those white tabs are showing, and I'm going to cover that up. I already cut a piece and replicated that blue starry background. However, I wasn't happy with it because I only cut it so that it was just a little bit larger than our aperture, which is again 4 inches wide by 2.5 tall. But I actually want to cover the full length of those white glue tabs that are showing so that we don't see any white. I always want to make sure that even if the card recipient kind of inspects your card at different angles, that everything looks as polished and finished as possible. And I like to cover up all of those sort of inner workings. So I'm going to cut myself another panel here. I actually cut it to 3 3/4 by 4 inches. And even that ended up being a little short. I must have mismeasured because you'll see when I fit the piece in, see how I'm struggling to open it? Sometimes it's just a matter of exercising the mechanism, but by the end, when I was finished with the card, that hadn't resolved itself, and so that's why I wanted to find a way to fix it and get it to glide more smoothly. I would recommend, if you do want to cover up the entire length of those strips, that you cut your piece, instead of 3 3/4 tall, cut it to maybe 4 inches or at least 3 7/8. But I think 4 inches would work just fine as well, because then you'll cover the entire length. And you'll see in a bit here when I place this panel that there's still a sliver of white showing, but I'm not too bothered by that. It's just a little bit. And so here I'm showing how to create that starry background using that die from Sizzix, and I'm going to keep all those little stars because for one, I think they would be really great as shaker fill, but on this card itself, I'll be using it to decorate the front of the card. And this starry background die is really nice because you can just use portions of it. You can twist and turn it to create different patterns, and it's just a really nice effect. So I'll put run some dotty dry adhesive through it, and I'm gonna back it with just plain white paper so that it mimics what we created on our the back card base panel. So the star pattern's not going to line up 100% with our back panel, but that's okay. I think it's better to at least cover up those white glue tabs, and see how there's a little bit of white still showing at the bottom there. It's not terrible, but if I were to do this again, I would definitely cut that piece a little bit taller. So there we have our stage, our background all set, and now what's left to do is actually create these little landscape bridge pieces. So you can see here how if you only attach those side locking pieces so that they're flush with the bottom, you can just put both pieces in and then slip them into the slots pretty easily. However, there's a chance that could easily, well, I don't know how easily, but there's a chance it could fall out. And so if you want something a little bit more secure, then what you can do is prepare your bridge pieces, but don't attach the second 1/4 inch strip until you go to actually place it inside your card base like I'm doing here. And I did mention earlier that these sort of landscape bridge pieces I cut to 4.5, and with the 1/4 inch strips on both ends, that leaves you exactly 4 inches where you can create your scene. And that 4 inches does exactly match the width of the aperture from the front of the card. However, if you wanted, and I might try this when I use this die set again, you could cut it a little bit wider, maybe 5 inches, and then that gives you a little bit more wiggle room to pull your mechanism a little bit further than just the 4 inches of the aperture. So here you can see I'm actually using 2 strips of 1/4 inch cardstock on both on each end, and that makes this piece really, really sturdy. It's not going to bend on you, hopefully, just through regular use. And so that will definitely help to keep these landscape bridge pieces in place. And all I do is just cut just from any piece of scrap. I'm using 110 pound, and I would definitely recommend using a thicker cardstock like 100 or above. That way these pieces are really stiff and they're strong, and then on top of that you're doubling them up. I do only use dry adhesive here, but you could definitely use liquid adhesive as well if you really want to make sure that it's a nice, strong, permanent bond. So go ahead and slip that through, and you can see it's a perfect fit. It's really snug. It's not going to allow your sliding mechanism to be pulled beyond those 4 inches, because you can see here it's a fairly tight fit as I place these strips onto the side here. You really do only have that extra little 1/4 of an inch on both sides. And as I mentioned, you do want to place this so that it hangs off the bottom by about 1/4 of an inch and extends well above the top of the slot itself. And that will keep it nice and snug in there. And that is all of our bridge pieces in. So now you can go and decorate and add additional elements to your scene. So I'm going to keep everything really simple, nice and white, and I'm attaching my decorative elements or scene elements to the front of the bridge pieces, but you could also attach it to the back. It just depends on what you prefer. And every time I add an element to the scene, I make sure to open and close the card to ensure that I haven't added something that's going to interfere with the card being able to close down completely flat. And so you just want to continue to kind of test your mechanism. And you can see every time I open and close it, it's not a very smooth glide. And so it's definitely something that was bugging me by the time I finish this card, because I want the card recipient to not have to struggle with what should be a really fun, interactive card. So as I mentioned earlier, if you hang out to the end, you'll see how I dealt with that, and there may be maybe not everybody will have the same issues that I had. Maybe it was how I attached everything or the types of paper or glue that I used. But for this card anyways, I did find that the sliding was you can definitely slide it open and close. It just wasn't as smooth as how I'd like it. So I'm going to add my sentiment and start to decorate the front of my card. And I've got this Season's Greetings sentiment from a Sizzix Holiday Sentiment die set that I used a lot last year and will probably use a lot this year as well. There's actually two different sets. There's one that has more general sentiments like Season's Greetings, Happy Holidays, things like that. And then there's another one that is more specifically Christmas. So it's got Merry Christmas, I think Merry and Bright, Noel, things like that. So I have both, and they both really come in handy. With so many of these little houses left over because I wanted to keep the inside scene really simple. But I had so many of these houses left over because every time you run the die through, you do get 9 of them. I decided to use up the rest as extra decorative elements on the front of my card. And so it gives you this really nice, even though it's white on white, it gives you this really nice embossed effect or look to it, which I think is kind of cool. This is attempt number 1 at fixing the sliding, and it worked out really well to place another band. I placed it all the way to the edge of the card, and that's what worked really well. However, you can't place this band all the way to the edge of the card because then it won't close all the way. So I had to cut the strip in half and then place it a little bit further in, and that didn't work all that great. It's still a little bit kind of tough to open. You really have to open it at just the right angle and slide it very parallel to the card in order to get it to open smoothly. And I even tried adding some baby powder to everything within that band and mechanism because sometimes maybe there's something like a little bit sticky, maybe there's some extra friction there, and so something like your anti-static powder or a baby powder or cornstarch can help to remove any of that stickiness. And I generously powdered everything. That still didn't work, and then I thought I'll just leave that be for a second and then just get these really pretty cute stars added to the front of my card as I think about what else I can do to smooth out that sliding mechanism, if there's anything to be done at all. And so hang on for a little bit more and you'll see what I ultimately come up with, which worked really well for me. And so I definitely recommend it. And I'll be using this little trick the next time I put together one of these cards. So I'm just going to continue to add on these little bits, and you can see how many drop out of creating those backgrounds. So, I definitely think they make for really good shaker fill, so well worth keeping. And there is our card essentially complete. And so we've got the nice little houses at the bottom. I might add some stars to the center, where the portion that covers up the aperture initially, but I really like how this card turned out. It's nice and simple, but it's really kind of nice and fun as the interactive mechanism. So here, I don't know if you can notice it, but the left side was gliding much more smoothly than the right because I did already try out my little trick here just to see if it worked, and then I decided to record it for this video. So I'm just gonna cut off those bands that I had glued down already, and I'm very, very carefully peeling up the cardstock where it was glued down. And I'm trying to peel it so that it's not taking off any cardstock from the front panel, but rather leaving behind cardstock from the band. And that way, I don't weaken the front panel too much. So a lot of times when you're making interactive or sliding cards, Scotch tape can come in handy because it's nice and smooth, and it will, kind of smooth out any surfaces that might have some friction that prevents your card from sliding smoothly. So what I've done is place some cardstock, and I'm just folding it over the sliding panel, and then gluing down my band right on top, so it's going to be adhered by the liquid adhesive I put down, as well as that the other half of the Scotch tape. So I'll show you how I did that again. Sticky side down. It's going to go down halfway covered by the sliding panel. And then I fold it right over the sliding panel, put a little bit of glue down where I know my band will get attached, and then I push my band down so that it's stuck to that Scotch tape. So basically the Scotch tape is wrapped around our sliding panel, and that's what makes it nice and smooth, so there isn't that friction of it sliding between two pieces of cardstock. So I hope that tip was well worth waiting for, and I know it helped my card out a lot. If you like this video, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you don't want to miss future videos, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Thank you so much for joining me, and until my next video, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye!